Hallo und herzlich willkommen zu einer neuen Podcast-Episode. Diesmal zu Gast Inga Strümke. Hallo
Ja,
Inga.
stimmt. Hallo.
Stimmt. Ja, das wird ein sehr besonderes Interview, weil wir werden es tatsächlich auf Englisch machen. Und ich weiß, du kannst mich verstehen, weil du bist nämlich in Deutschland geboren. So viel kann ich auch aus dem Buch, um das geht es nämlich auch, was du geschrieben hast, entnehmen. I have to say, I'm not in my normal office room. I'm today visiting my brother. And I told him, okay, nice to meet you, but and you know, I have to do an interview at 6. Can I have a quiet room? And now I'm sitting here at the desk of my brother.
Typical Sunday activity, isn't it? Just
True.
go record a podcast episode. It's what people do, isn't it?
So 1989 is the big date, right?
Yes.
That was your birthday.
Exactly, and that's when the wall fell. And
Yeah.
that is how I remember when the wall fell. It was the day, the year I was born.
Simple. And in which town you were born?
What was it called again? I think it was Gummersbach.
Gummersbach, okay.
Yeah, but I might be confusing that because I don't have any memories actually from Germany. I remember that we had a garden. That's what I remember. But I moved to Norway when I was 4 years old.
Because your parents were like falling in love into this country, or what's the reason behind it?
No, it's not. It's not that nice story. No. So my parents got divorced, and my mother has a Norwegian link. So I actually have proper Norwegian genes on my mother's side. And we moved all the way up north to Narvik because that's where we had family.
Okay, nice. Yeah. I've also family in Canada and in the US. Yeah. So there's always an option to move, to move there. But still, I'm in Germany now. So let's see. Yeah. And how... I will just ask you some questions. I think it's the normal ones, what you are used to answer. Like, what was your link to the natural sciences? Like, did your studies in
Physicists?
Physicist.
Yeah.
Thank you for my word. That means you wanted to understand, I guess, to understand how the world works. And
exactly. That was really how I got into it. I wanted to understand not just the world, but the whole universe. And I was so fortunate that I had like the curiosity for how does the universe work from I was a little kid. And it might have been thanks to science fiction. I think that many people get into physics because of science fiction. So I watched Stargate. I don't know if you remember that TV show. Yeah, they go through this circular portal and they travel to other planets through the galaxy in this wormhole. And they talk about, wormholes, things like that. And I remember being like 12 years old and wondering if you can actually make a wormhole and what is an event horizon and why is there a speed of light. And I was so lucky that I kind of got into the field I ended up studying through curiosity. And now I work at a university and I work with artificial intelligence. But still, when students ask me, like, how should I know what I want to do with my life? I always say, just follow your curiosity. Because if you're curious about something, you will want to do that thing and you will want to think about that thing a lot. And that is how you get good at something. You don't get good at something because you think that you should be good at it, but because you really want to understand it. So I did theoretical physics, and I just remember like people warning me. They were like, you will never get a job. Like theoretical physics is just very difficult and nobody will ever pay you for it. So for me, studying physics was like my youth rebellion, which is interesting now in retrospect, because now I will be so humble and say that now it's not a problem for me to get a job.
At least you can switch. Yeah, you can start to write
popular scientific books.
Yeah, scientific books. But as you say, you can write stories. Yeah, like you read in your when you was a teenager. And is it planned, by the way, to write like novels about this future thing, like AI and so on?
Well, I think that there are a lot of like futuristic books about AI on the market. And I mean, artificial intelligence has a very kind of prominent role in science fiction. And then it's usually about evil robots that gain consciousness and take over the world and start killing people. But I don't know much fiction that I think is kind of realistic and nuanced. You know, it's always about this computer that gains consciousness and gets jealous of its creators and wants to kill people.
And we are worrying about this, yeah? It's one big point, yeah?
We worry about it, but I think that is thanks to popular culture and Hollywood movies. I think there's a lot to be worried about with artificial intelligence, but I don't think that the greatest worry we should have is self-conscious robots that want to kill people. I think there's a lot of things that can go wrong, but that scenario, I think, is the most unlikely one.
Have you counted it? Is it valid, this quote?
Yeah. What is my scientific basis?
Can I rely on it?
Well, I think that if you look into the world right now, AI and computers are definitely doing harm, are doing damage. And there are many examples of that, perhaps primarily in the US, but I mean also in Europe. You see AI systems being used for basically discrimination and sexism and racism. And we also see that algorithms on social media that basically tell people, especially young people, what content they should consume. This actually leads to decreased self-worth, anxiety disorders, eating disorders. So we use AI systems already in a way that causes harm to people, but never, ever has a robot decided on its own accord to harm a person. And it's always because of the way that we put the AI systems into use. So I think if you just look at the observations, there is a much more sound, much more reasonable basis for being worried about how AI systems are being used to, quite frankly, make more money without concern for ethics than it is to expect that robots will start shooting at us. Because we don't have robots that shoot at us because they want to. It's never happened, right? So there's no precedence.
Yeah, and what's about this? I'm not sure if this is science or like just a story, but what's about the things when an AI program is thinking in
quotation marks,
marks, when it is thinking, okay, the room is messed by a human, yeah, and I'm a cleaning robot, and my task is to make it clean the room, and I will just kill the human because he is a reason why it's get messed up always, and then the room stays clean.
Yeah.
So what's about this?
Yeah, so this is also a thought experiment that I use in my book. And it's one of many ways you can illustrate that if you give one goal to a very efficient and intelligent system, then it might achieve the goal, solve the problem in a way that you don't like. And so this cleaning robot example, that is definitely a thought experiment. This hasn't happened. Our cleaning robots cannot kill us. Yeah. They don't have the means physically to kill us. It doesn't mean that it's impossible that they would kill us if they could, if their only goal was to keep the room clean.
No guns for cleaning robots, I suppose.
I think this is a rule that we can propose. Let's call Brussels and suggest this rule right away. Okay. No, but I mean, you definitely see this thing. It's called misaligned goals. Right? It's that you give a goal to a system and that it turns out that by solving this goal, you're misaligned with all the other values that we want to protect. And I think, for instance, on YouTube, that is exactly what's happening. The recommender systems there are asked to optimize the user experience, so to give people videos that make them stay on the platform. Right? And you would think that, oh, this is just going to give them engaging content. It's just going to give them videos that they like. But what actually happens is that you radicalize people, you create echo chambers, you make people basically just unable to close the YouTube window at all. And so for me, that is an example of misaligned goals that is already existent and already a problem in the real world.
And let me come back to your career. We already knew that you started your studies, and then how it came that you run into the AI movement. What's behind this story?
Yes, so I stumbled into AI twice. So the first time I was studying physics at the university. And then as a young, curious student, I basically did what I did is that I opened the whole study catalog. So looking at like all the topics that I could study at the university. And then far up on the list, it said artificial intelligence programming. And this was in 2008. And AI was not cool in 2008. Like almost nobody worked with it. And I was like, oh my God, can you do that? Like, can you learn how to program intelligent systems? So I took this AI course and I thought it was very interesting. It was very fun. But then I kind of went back to my physics studies and I finished my master's in physics. And I, as all good Norwegians, I worked a couple of years in the oil industry. And then I went back to physics. I did a PhD in particle physics. And that is when it happened finally. So the second time was the final time. So what I did then was that I was analyzing data from CERN about particle collisions. And I thought I wanted to use AI, so machine learning, to basically tell particles apart, like which signals correspond to which particle. And what I found out then was that depending on how I trained the algorithm would end up preferring one particle or the other. Right? So it was not just completely independent of me. Like the way I designed the system made the system prefer one particle or the other. And I thought, wait, this must be exactly what happens when AI systems are sexist. Like you create them so that they end up suggesting more women or men or whatever for different positions. And there were examples of that, like Amazon tried to use AI as a hiring tool, and they ended up being completely sexist and just suggesting male applicants. And then I talked to friends of mine who were working as data scientists, like, what do you think about this when you design systems? Like, how does this bias sneak in? And how do you avoid this kind of bias? And basically, my friends at this time, this was in 2019, so now it's 6 years ago, they were like, I've never heard of this. And I thought that, okay, so this kind of particle sexism that I found in my weird PhD in particle physics, this is actually a problem in the real world. And people aren't really having a discussion about it. So that is why when I finished my PhD in physics, I went to PwC, this giant consulting company, right? And I said that, well, your motto is about creating trust in society and doing audits to find out that systems don't harm society. How about, should we do an AI audit? And they were like, yes, let's do an AI audit. And fortunately, before you can do audits, there has to be a law. And at this point in 2019, there was no AI law, right? The first time we actually got a global AI law was now the fall of 2024, right? The AI Act that was enforced by the EU. So 2019, when I got into AI, it was just way too early to start thinking about auditing or regulating AI systems. And that is why I went into AI research instead, because I thought that there were just too many unanswered questions yet. We don't know how the future with AI is going to play out. And we don't know what kind of harms we can expect. And we don't know how to mitigate the harms either.
Mm-hmm. Okay. By the way, did you find the bug, I would say, the biased bug in the data? And could you correct it and get a better idea of how the universe is working regarding the particles?
Yeah, so that is actually the headache. And the bit I would say also the beauty of it is that it wasn't a bug. Every time you use data to create a system, the data you use dictates, right, the preference the system is going to end up having. So it's not as easy as saying, I'm going to make a perfect system that will not treat anybody differently, right? Because the whole point of trying to tell things apart is to realize that things are different and need to be treated differently, right? So you can never make a system that will just treat all people the same, because that would be a useless system, right? So it wasn't a bug. It was what we call prior dependence. It depends on the data that you stuff in when you make the system. And based on that, it's going to prefer one thing or the other. So rather than saying that I'm going to make a perfect system, which is impossible, you actually need to go in and say, I don't want the system to discriminate based on these and these things. And so you could say that if I make an AI system to suggest insurance prices, you can say that it should discriminate based on how people behave in traffic, but it should not discriminate based on your chromosomes, so whether you're a female or a male. Right? So you have to go in and be pretty specific about it. Which properties can it use to discriminate and which properties can it not use?
Okay. then after this, I think for you, it felt a bit, I could imagine a bit like being a show star or something like this, because I found a TEDx video about your talk at YouTube, and that means you get a lot of audience, or you got a lot of audience, and people got aware of you. And could you tell us a bit about this time?
Oh, yeah, definitely. So I've always liked to talk about science because I think that as just a member of society and a member of democracy, it's important for me that people make rational choices. I want people to know about, the scientific method. I want people to make good rational choices. So I always like to talk about science. But I remember that whenever I wanted to do science communication about physics, people were like, why should we care about this? Why should we care about particles? And I remember thinking, yeah, that's fair. Particles and particle physics don't affect your life, so that's fine. The moment I started talking about AI, especially after November 2022, when ChatGPT came into the world, especially after that, people were so interested to hear about AI. And I published my book in Norway in the beginning of 2023. So just after the ChatGPT moment, kind of. And it was a very kind of welcome environment to do science communication in. I remember there was a period where journalists called me on average 3 times a day, like for several weeks. And so you could say that with the book, the Norwegian release of the book was extremely well timed. That was not on purpose. That was pure stupid luck. But the book ended up being the national bestseller for 17 weeks in a row. Like people were so hungry to learn about AI. And then I was just by luck positioned so that I could say, okay, I can come and talk about AI. So in Norway, I've become one of the people that kind of the public associates with AI. Like when the media has a question about AI, they often call me. Wow. Because I was just the right person at the right time, So that was very lucky for me.
So you are now quite used to talk in talk shows and in the television and so on. And when you go to the bakery, then people are knocking at your back and saying, "Yeah, you are the expert," and so on. Yeah, is it the case?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Especially on airplanes. I don't know why, but it seems like in airports and airplanes, people just have kind of no limits. They will just come to me and go, "You're the AI woman, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that's me." And they just they open the floodgates and start asking questions. Yeah, I talked to ChatGPT the other day, and my kid uses it. And is it good for my kid to use it? And should my kids use Snapchat? Yeah, so people are extremely open and yeah, I get recognized in the street a lot, and it's been like that for 2 years now.
Ooh, okay. When you need asylum in Germany, come to us.
Yeah, definitely.
but now we have the problem. Your book got published also in Germany. Now the same will happen here.
Yeah, oh no.
Especially after this podcast here, of course.
Yeah, you're not doing me any favors.
Oh, here, sorry. Okay, we are quitting it. I just want to also ask you, that means I'm wondering, because there is no English version of this book available. Yeah, why is it?
It's a very good question, because many people have asked me for an English translation.
Of course. Yeah.
And the book is available now in Swedish, Danish, German, and Japanese, actually, which is incredibly random, but yeah. And there have been talks about translating it to English. The thing is that the English market is full of AI books. There are so many AI books, especially in the US. So the question is then, why should somebody spend money translating an AI book from Norwegian to English? Like from this weird Norwegian woman that nobody in the US has heard of. Like commercially, it's a bit challenging. I'm also like, the book has a very European perspective. I mean, you read it, right? It has examples from Norway, from the Netherlands. There might be a German example also. I talk about the AI Act. It's about Western or very European values. I kind of really wrote it with the Nordics and Europe in mind. So for me, it's also kind of fine that it's a perfect fit for Europe and then maybe not a perfect fit for the rest of the world. And that's okay.
By the way, as a German user for Amazon, when I type in the German word KI book, KI Buch, just this KI Buch goes right to your book, yeah, which was just now available. So it's the book, yeah.
Yeah, I've heard that it's quite popular in Germany.
Yeah.
I think it's the most sold German AI book right now. And I mean, I'm of course very happy and very flattered about it. And it's a bit special for me also, since I kind of started my life in Germany. But I think that also means that you Germans maybe like the Scandinavian way of writing, because I have a very typical kind of Scandinavian communication style.
We're watching like movies from Norway, you know, these scary ones or so, yeah.
Yeah.
So we are quite used to this kind of mystic flair and so on. But so it's for you, then it's easier to place your books there, yeah.
Exactly, and I think it might be a good match. Like that people like the tone of voice, because the Norwegian or the Scandinavian tone of voice is very informal. It's very easygoing, and I think that in order to learn something that might be quite complicated, like artificial intelligence is a bit complicated if you've never thought about it before, then maybe it's just a good match to get it then in a tone of voice that is informal. So it feels a bit like somebody's just talking to you instead of somebody lecturing it to you, if you know what I'm trying to describe.
Is there, like in the German word Hörbuch, is also an audiobook available in Norway? Or
in Norway, that was a funny story. So first, my publisher wanted me to do the audiobook, and I've never done an audiobook before. So they like hired the studio for me in the city where I live. And I went there and I read half the book. It took me 2 entire weekends to read half the book into the microphone. And then they were like, yeah, no, that does not work with your dialect. So they had to find a professional actor to read the audiobook. And this professional actor had a completely different dialect than I had. So it was released with her voice. And then they got a lot of like requests and complaints saying that, no, you should stick to the original dialect of the author, so of me. So then they had to get a new actor after 1 year to make a new audiobook. So there's actually 2.5 audiobooks available now in Norwegian. So you can just choose.
And when you talk about dialect, that means you have a German accent, or regarding the dialect, or is it different dialects in Norway, of course, or
definitely different dialects? Yeah, so I have an extremely northern dialect, and you can really, I mean, we pronounce words differently, we use different words, the grammar can even be different, and things might be funny in one dialect and just sound very vulgar in another. So if you read the Norwegian book, you can definitely pinpoint my dialect, which is also a funny linguistic fact.
Cool. That means when it's translated, the audiobook in German, then it should be Bavarian or no?
Bavarian, Sächsisch. You know, something funny.
Because northern part, Ostfriesisch, that would be really great.
Yeah, something extremely informal, to put it that way.
Yeah, we have a very famous actor. He's coming from Ostfriesland. You know him probably. Otto is.
That would be the dream. Otto reading my audiobook. Then I would just go and die happily. You know, that would be peak life. Yeah. Can you arrange this? Can you send him an email?
Yeah, I will do that. I will go to his house. Yeah, he has a Otto house there. Of course, he's not living there, but I will place a letter to him.
I actually remember the Ottifanten from when I was little. Yeah. So that would be that would be the best thing that can happen.
Okay, cool. Okay, back to your story. Okay, then you decided to be a TV star, of course, and also go further in academia, right?
Yeah, the TV star thing was not an active decision. That is not something I woke up one morning and planned. No, but the academia thing, that was definitely a decision. I definitely wanted to go back to research. Although academia is, of course, a difficult place to live also. There's a lot of elbows, a lot of strong personalities, a lot of big egos. But I can say, luckily, that computer science and AI, I think, is a more easy place to survive than physics. And it might be because that computer science is much easier to put into practice. The world, the industry, the public sector sees a lot more immediate value from computer science than from physics. So it's much easier to get funding, to get industry collaboration, and also to kind of see the immediate value of what you're doing and to see the impact on society. So for me, going back to academia and going into computer science felt almost like just a big warm hug compared to what I was expecting, which I'm really happy about. And I've been in academia the last 4 years. I'm an associate professor right now, and I'm pretty sure that I'm going to stay in academia because I absolutely love this idea that you can do research kind of just for the sake of discovering new knowledge. That you don't have to end up with something you can sell or pitch. You just like wonder how stuff works and you try to figure it out. So I've kind of managed to get back to this feeling that I discovered when I was a kid, was that I can just be driven by my curiosity. And I know that people are driven and motivated by different things. I know that academia is not for everyone, but I'm quite happy that I found out now that I'm 35 years old. I finally found out like what's the place for me. And that seems to be academia.
Oh, that sounds very good. And by the way, I read your book and you were mentioning a movie, Matrix it's called.
Yeah.
And I do mention this story because you have written that you learned first what a matrix is, and your decision was not to watch the movies before learning about what the matrix is. And then, mathematically, and then after this, you went to watch these movies. Is it true?
Yeah, it's actually true. I remember everybody was watching these Matrix movies. And this was when I had just started universities. I learned about matrices. And I thought that must be the most boring thing to make a movie about at all. Because the Matrix, right, is a collection of numbers. I will absolutely not watch a movie that is about a collection of numbers. So it took me a long time to watch the Matrix movies. And now I absolutely love them. I mean, especially the first Matrix movies, it's genius and it has philosophical depth and it's just marvelous. So I can be a bit stuck in my head, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, and the matrix or the matrices, they are very, how you say, important in AI. Can you just say why it's important, this small unit?
Yeah, definitely. So there's several reasons. So one thing is, for instance, that the way we represent pictures is by using matrices. So if you take a picture with your phone, it creates 3 matrices with the million entries in each of them. And in order to make computers kind of capable of understanding what is in an image, like if you take a picture of your dog, where's the dog? Then they have to learn to analyze matrices in just the right way. So that is one thing, is that how we've chosen to represent the world digitally is often in matrix form. That is one thing. And the other thing, which might be even more important, is that right now, what is really making AI work is these things called neural networks. So it's these programs that are loosely inspired by the human brain. And the way any neural network is represented inside a computer is in the form of a matrix. Like, so if you train a neural network, and a neural network can be like ChatGPT, inside there, the language model is a neural network. If you want a neural network to work inside your computer at all, the computer has to handle large matrices. This is also why the GPU industry is suddenly going absolutely haywire, is because these are computational units that are just very capable of handling matrix multiplication. Right. So the reason is twofold, but I would say mainly it's because neural networks, if you really look into what they are a collection of matrices.
Okay. And you were mentioning, for example, the biggest company behind this is NVIDIA. Which kinds of computers do you use for your work?
This is a really, really good question, because here there is like a shift of power going on. So in my office, I just have a huge gaming laptop, because gaming laptops often have powerful and several GPUs. So I can use that laptop to test my raw ideas.
Which card is in there?
Oh my
You
God,
know?
I don't remember. Sorry.
Like
This
40,
is like
80.
yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is like asking me about car brands. It's like it's the one I could afford. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah. So and that computer is like it's powerful enough to like test my basic ideas. I can train some neural networks. I can analyze them. But if I want to make something that can actually like not even compete, but just behave something like the big AI systems out there that are blowing our minds away, like Copilot and ChatGPT, then of course I need a cluster. I need a supercomputer. And not many countries in the world have access to the computing facilities that, for instance, Amazon, Google, Meta, and these companies have. Right. So it's not just about kind of knowing enough about AI, but it's also about having the computing power available to just do sufficient matrix multiplication to be able to make big AI systems. And right now, geopolitically, this is incredibly interesting, right? Because if we make AI systems that actually contribute to our productivity, then that means that whoever can actually make and offer these systems ends up with a bit of a power monopoly. Like, say, if Norway cannot make a language model that knows Norwegian as well as ChatGPT or Copilot knows it, that means that that puts us in a position of being dependent on a commercial company that sits in the United States and where we don't make the rules, right? Where we become a customer in a very skewed power balance. So that is actually, I think, very interesting because for most of our modern history, the forefront of human knowledge has been public and in universities. And now that's shifted, right? Because the companies or the entities that can afford really big clusters and supercomputers are privately owned. And they don't necessarily have an incentive to share their knowledge. Right? So the forefront of human knowledge, especially in AI, is very often behind closed doors in private companies that will use that, of course, to increase their revenue because that is how they survive.
Okay. This for me, it sounds like a bit dystopia, right?
Yeah, for most of us.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not just you.
And what's about the other way around movement? That means that more models are possible to run on a cell phone, on a small computer, They're local LLMs, yeah? What's about this direction? Is this good? Do you see good points on it? What are your thoughts about it?
Yeah, so this is a difficult question also because much of it is on the research front, right? So the largest GPT model now, this O1 or whatever it's called, is so huge that I can't even store it on my computer, right? It's enormous. But you don't always need the biggest models to do mundane tasks. Right. And I think it would be good if we could turn research a bit more in the direction of making small models that are cheaper to run and that can run locally on a small computer or on a cell phone. A bit also inspired by the brain, right? Because I mean, the brain doesn't have a power consumption comparable to that of a small city, right? Our brain uses as much power as like a glühbirne, so I think that a goal should be to make energy efficient systems that can run on small devices. But right now, I think the push is towards making just bigger models that can do a large variety of tasks. That can write text and analyze images and play chess and just do absolutely everything. These are called foundation models, and they're supposed to be able to run on any kind of data. At the same time, of course, consumers, like people like you and me, are interested in having AI systems that can run on our phones also when we don't have internet connection. Right. So there is definitely research and development efforts going in both directions. So it's both this race to make larger models, but also it is to make kind of consumer friendly models. And I think like research wise, it's much more interesting to see how much capability you can get out of a small model. Because for me as a researcher, it's not so impressive that you can make a huge system that can, guess correctly most of the time. Right? Because if you can use as much energy and as many parameters as you want, then of course you're going to end up with a system that makes the right approximations, right? But to make a small system and use as few parameters as possible and still get intelligent behavior, that I think reminds much more of intelligence. We sometimes say that comprehension is compression. Like if you're able to compress information into the smallest amount possible, then you really comprehend what it's about. So for me personally, that's much more interesting to make small systems that behave intelligently.
That reminds me on a programmer challenge, I think in the 80s or 90s or so, where they have these demos, like the small videos. And
demo scene.
Demo scene, yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a link, at least in the spirit, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, if you've been into demo scene at all, then you have to be really clever in order to make these little movies or these little film clips, right? Because you have to reuse shapes, right? So that means that you have to really understand what one shape is, and you have to represent it very sparsely. And I think that if you can say something in few words or represent something in a sparse way, that means that you've understood what the thing is, right? So there's definitely at least a conceptual link there, I think.
Very nice. Cool. I would like to know something totally different, maybe a bit back to the mystic part we're living. What's your opinion or how the thing with the trolls? You know, in Norway, there is a kind of history or so about the trolls. Can you tell us a bit about this?
Yeah, what's up with the trolls, the Norwegian trolls?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you believe in trolls or how?
No, let me just say that right away. Modern Norwegians don't believe in trolls. Yeah. No, yeah. So it's a bit of a mythical thing, but I think people a couple hundred years ago definitely believed in trolls. So a troll is this giant made out of rocks that moves around. And I think, according to legend, it also eats rocks, which is a bit strange. And they're stupid, big, and I think they also kill humans. But the thing is that they're only active at night, because if you can lure a troll out into sunshine, it will turn into rocks, and then it just dies. Right? So it's like this collection of rocks that gains consciousness and mobility during the night. And actually, almost every time my father, who's German and who doesn't speak a word of Norwegian, every time he comes and visits me, and we go for walks here, and in the winter in Norway, it's always dark. When we go for walks, then he looks around and says something like, "Kein Wunder, dass die Norweger das mit den Trolls erfunden haben." Because it just looks so spooky here. And when you see the moonlight and there is no other light, it's almost like the rocks are moving. Like, so if you're just a bit superstitious, then I think you could even now in modern times walk around in the Norwegian mountain and just go like, did that rock move? Yeah, I think it's that when people many hundred years ago lived without lamps and it's dark all the time and they're superstitious, they think that the rocks are alive. And that is, I think, where the idea of trolls came from. And it's interesting that we're talking about this now in an AI podcast, because people talk to chatbots, and many people think that the chatbots are somehow alive and that they're conscious. And I think that it's a very deep tendency that we people have, is that we see intent and meaning and a will in almost anything. We see faces everywhere. And if something moves, it doesn't take much imagination from us to think that it wants to move. Right? So for me, I've used the troll analogy when talking about AI. When people would say, are computers conscious? And I say, well, you don't have to be crazy to think that computers are conscious, because a couple of hundred years ago in Norway, we thought that rocks were conscious. So I think it says more about us humans than it does about the rocks.
Interestingly, the rocks, after a couple of years, I think scientific people are looking at these rocks and they say, okay, definitely there are no trolls.
The rocks.
But what about, yeah, the rocks, right. But what's about as you say, the AI and consciousness behind it? What do you think? Is there don't know, 20 years maybe, is there then consciousness behind this? Maybe? How is the probability for this?
Yeah, that's a good question, because we see that we make computer programs now that are more and more intelligent, but we know that intelligence and consciousness are different things. And we have very unintelligent animals that are fully conscious, right? So consciousness seems to be something else that evolution brought about than intelligence. One huge challenge here is that we don't have a definition of consciousness. Right? You don't know if I'm conscious, but you think I'm conscious because I'm pretty similar to you. We're both people. You know that you're conscious, so you can assume that I'm also conscious. And I behave in a way that would suggest that I'm conscious. But what if you encounter a system that is nothing like you, that does not come from Darwinian evolution, right? That doesn't have any reason to be conscious the way that you have a reason to be conscious. How would you check the system's consciousness, right? And then you have to start asking yourself, well, what exactly is consciousness? Like, how would I measure it? And then you can say, well, having consciousness means that there is a feeling that corresponds to being you. Like, my consciousness tells me that being me feels a certain way. But that's kind of the best we have in terms of definition. So it's not like we can go out measure like with a consciousness index or something. But I think that in order for a system to be conscious, it needs some incentive to be conscious. Right? It has to have a reason. There has to be some benefit in experiencing itself. And I think we are far closer to making extremely intelligent systems than we are to making conscious systems. But that might just be because we know what we're looking for when we look for intelligence. We look for the ability to solve problems. But when we look for consciousness, we don't even know what we're looking for. And I mean, you can really dig deep into this and start asking yourself, well, is a fly conscious? Is an ant conscious? Is a spider conscious? And I think, so my personal take on this is that consciousness comes in degrees. You can be a bit conscious or very conscious, and then maybe we can start making systems that have to observe themselves and have to make some inner model of themselves in the world. And then maybe we can start talking about a very low degree of consciousness. But regardless of what we make, my hunch is that being a computer will never feel like being a human. So it would be a different kind of consciousness, I think. But this is just like this physicist's personal guess. I don't know if I think that computer scientists are the right crowd to judge what consciousness would be like in a computer.
And we talked about the small models, where you are attracted in. And what's about the new for 2025, the new thing, the AI agents?
Yeah.
What's that? And these are small units of AI, but connected together, and then maybe with the consciousness. What's that? And question then: are you using them for your normal day routines or so?
Yeah. So I haven't completely understood what this AI agents thing is. It might be just a marketing thing. Because when the kind of research that I do together with my students, we do something called reinforcement learning, and there we've used a thing that we've called agents for for tens of years. What you do is that you create a virtual environment in your computer, which can be chess or checkers or a computer game or whatever, and then you put an AI system in there and ask it to find out itself how to master the game or whatever. And that system you call an agent. So whenever you do this thing called reinforcement learning, then you have an agent. And the point of the agent is to solve the goal, and then it gets a reward. Right? So conceptually, we've been doing this for decades, making environments, creating agents, have them solve tasks, and maybe also collaborate. And maybe one agent is better at, I don't know, moving pieces, and one agent is better at interpreting what it's looking at. So this might just be clever marketing of something that we've been doing for a long time. I'm not really sure. But to answer the second question, whether I use them, the answer is no. I almost don't use anything from like commercially available AI. I do AI research and then I go home, and then I don't use AI in my spare time. I think a lot of AI is just absurd amounts of power consumption. for like clumsy solutions. I'm not really on the AI hype train. For me, it's still matrices.
This reminds me on, on the founder of Apple, and he would not give like a tablet
His
or so
kids.
to his kids, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean the place in the world where you find most of the stupid phones, so not smartphones, is Silicon Valley. Because the Silicon Valley people don't want their kids to have smartphones. And that for me just speaks volumes.
Oh yeah, that's really, and of course then we are in a kind of discussion about education. Yeah, you write like educational books, or and what's about AI and education? Yeah, but I'm not sure if you have the time. Maybe not. So, what question is missing today? What you would like to go into shortly? What should be placed here?
Oh, good question. So one thing is that my dude's gonna come home, and then I have to help him chop wood. So then we have to finish. But yeah, what would be a good place to kind of end this? I don't know. How do you usually end your podcasts? Like on a cheery note?
Sometimes I just say thank you, and that's all. Because the conversation was very good. It's always good in my podcast, of course. Or you want to ask me something?
Well, yeah, that would actually be a nice place to end for me. Like, do you have kids?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, then it would be interesting for me to know, like, what advice would you give your kids growing up now in this very chaotic, rapidly evolving AI world? Like, you want them to be safe, but you don't know what kind of technology is going to show up. You don't know what jobs they can take in the future. How should they learn to distinguish fake from true? So what kind of advice do you give your kids?
Yeah, as far as I think, it's good to handle all the stuff. That means to get into it and learn something out of it, get a feeling for it, whatever this means. And yeah, use it in a conscious way. But I'm not sure if this is the right track. Yeah, the correct track. But
yeah, well, nobody knows.
yeah.
Right? It's we're living in this kind of careful what you wish for moment. Like anything can happen.
But when you don't use it, yeah, like for example, my parents or so, they don't use it, then you can't get a feeling for it, and you can't decide if the answer from ChatGPT is good or not good, or how you can sort it in your believings or so. Taking it and using it, but with care, and of course reading good books like your book is, and listen to good podcasts, for example, also of course. By the way, can you recommend good podcast or so for this topic like AI?
Well, I can get a bit fed up with AI because it's everywhere all the time and everybody's shouting. But there is this daily AI digests. It's a podcast that has 5-10 minute episodes, and it's like a newsletter that you can listen to while going to work. And then I just listen in, and they're really updated. And then I can decide based on their headlines whether there is something that I want to look into closer. So that is definitely the one I can recommend. But other than that, I actually listen more to philosophy podcasts because I think that like critical thinking and seeing several perspectives and thinking about kind of society as a whole and your personal morale is more important than ever. Because we live in a time now where you can just get exactly the content you want. You can be served with only opinions that you agree with. Like, I think critical thinking and scrutinizing your own morale is more important than ever. So, like, if I could recommend, other than your podcast, of course, I would go go for a conversational podcast with opinions that you disagree with, or go for philosophy. That would be my tip.
Cool. And thank you very much. I really enjoyed this conversation, and happy wood, how is it say?
Okay.
Yeah.
Wood chopping, yeah, it's ridiculously cold here, so we actually have to chop wood.
And how cold it is?
Now it's like -15.
Okay, we will be here tomorrow at -11, just in the night. Yeah. So.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, once. I think once.
No, they're Germany. Yeah, no, that is pretty cold.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being the only German podcast host so far who wanted to do an episode in English. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. So take care and goodbye.
Bye-bye.